Quickly after the meeting began, hold on one second.
Get your popcorn, y'all.
Popcorn, get your pistol. No,
For real though.
Quickly after this meeting began, one of the industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everybody else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no other details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but that was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industries and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable and the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement.
Damn.
He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. Then he says, I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in awe and confusion. At the same time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with music. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who receive funding from the government based on the number of inmates.
Mm-hmm.
The more inmates, the more the government would pay these prisons.
Mm-hmm.
It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employees had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remain filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by making music which promote criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as employees, we'd also be able to buy stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half of the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a fucking joke?" At this point, things became chaotic.
Right.
Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun, and we all backed off. They separated us from the crowd, and all four of us was escorted outside. My industry colleague, who opened up the meeting earlier, hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed an agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking out about this publicly, or even those who attended the meeting.
Damn.
I asked him, why was he involved with something so corrupt? And he replied, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we can do. And, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we want to challenge without risking consequences.
For his items in the store. While leaving the store, DaBaby ended up getting into his car and then was surrounded by law enforcement just a moment later. DaBaby was then taken to the side, and while they searched through his entire car, that's when the firearm was found. DaBaby was then taken into lockup and was able to be released on bail, for the time being of course, but still will have to face this case in court pretty soon. DaBaby only lasted 7 days into 2021 before getting arrested. But wait until you just hear about this next rapper, NBA Youngboy. Now this one is a pretty obvious one. NBA Youngboy, with his arrest record, will make it to just about every list, but NBA Youngboy has already had multiple run-ins with the law enforcement this year. But the most recent one just a couple days ago at the time of this recording was crazy. NBA Youngboy was taken into lockup while on a high-speed chase. Allegedly, NBA Youngboy tried losing the feds on the road, which again is a whole other charge in itself. But NBA Youngboy's car ended up getting flagged down as he was just driving on the road. NBA Youngboy had an outstanding federal warrant on his name and casually went out into the public for some reason. Now, once NBA Youngboy's car was found driving down the street, the FBI then started the chase for him. This did set off a short pursuit, but once NBA Youngboy's car was stopped due to traffic, apparently NBA Youngboy thought it would be a good idea to try to make a run for it on foot. NBA Youngboy tried running for the hills, with the feds literally on his tail the entire time, which again is another charge added to the existing ones. But then, funny enough, there was a couple of fans who spotted NBA Youngboy running from law enforcement. NBA Youngboy made a run for it in some fans' backyard, which ended up being caught on camera. But honestly, I'm not even surprised NBA Youngboy is on this list, if you know about his current prior situation. NLE Choppa. Now this was a surprise to many people, but NLE Choppa was taken into jail pretty recently after being caught in a pretty serious incident. Now reports came out of NLE Choppa being arrested. He was taken into lockup in Broward County for the charges of burglary, firearms, and possession, which is pretty crazy to think. Now, NLE Choppa was allegedly trying to break into his own or a friend's vehicle. This vehicle was taken into a tow yard as it was illegally parked. Now, inside of the car, allegedly NLE Choppa had a watch inside of the glove box. Knowing NLE Choppa, this was probably some sort of diamond out expensive watch, probably around $50,000, which I can understand why he would want it back. Now the funny thing is, you're probably wondering, how did he get arrested for burglary on his own car? Well, it wasn't his car in the tow yard. His actual car ended up being down the street in a different tow yard, and he was allegedly caught trying to get into someone else's car. Now, while trying to break into the car who doesn't even know if it was his or not, I'm assuming he was spotted, and the people who work at the tow yard must have ended up calling the law enforcement for backup, as they saw 3 men hop the fence wearing ski masks and trying to get into some parked cars inside of their tow yard. Now with their arrival, they ended up finding multiple things on NLE Choppa, which I am very surprised about, as he was with 2 other men at the time, and I'm very surprised they didn't take the fall for NLE. But NLE Choppa ended up getting taken into lockup on 4 charges and is still currently held in lockup at the time of this recording.